The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I turned down the narrow dirt road, headlights bouncing off tree trunks that seemed to lean inward like silent watchers. The town had been suffocating me all week. Every sideways glance at the grocery store, every whispered conversation I knew was about me, even when I couldn't hear the words. In a small town, silence carried as much judgment as spoken rumors. I needed space. That was why I came here. The lake spread out like a sheet of black glass at the end of the road, cradled by pines that cut the sky into jagged silhouettes. When I killed the engine, the sudden stillness was overwhelming. No hum of traffic, no buzz of neon signs, just the low trill of cicadas and the occasional splash of something unseen breaking the surface of the water. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin, sharp but calming, the kind of smell that reminded me of being a kid before life got complicated. Fishing had become my excuse. People thought I liked the sport, but the truth was I liked the solitude. I liked how time stretched and slowed here, how no one could look at me and decide what I was, who I was allowed to be. The town had already done that for me, whispering their conclusions in gas station parking lots and barber shops. Not right, they said. Different. It clung to me like smoke. Here, though, I could breathe. I unloaded my gear slowly, methodically, tackle box, cooler, rod, savoring the ritual. Each clink and snap felt grounding. I made my way to the dock, boards groaning under my weight, and settled near the end. I cast my line, watching the ripples fade into nothing. The water was so still it felt like the world was holding its breath with me. I let my shoulders relax. The stars peeked through thinning clouds, mirrored faintly in the lake's surface. A breeze rustled through the trees, and for the first time in days, I felt almost invisible. Safe. Then I heard it. The low growl of an engine in the distance. Tires crunching gravel. Headlights slicing through the dark. I stiffened, my heart jerking back into that familiar rhythm of dread. Out here, at this hour, there was only one kind of vehicle that prowled the backroads. Sure enough, as the lights came closer, I saw the shape. A sheriff's truck, its paint catching the faint reflection of moonlight, the insignia just barely visible. For a moment, I considered slipping quietly into the trees, abandoning my gear and vanishing into the night like some guilty kid. But the engine cut, the driver's door creaked open, and it was too late. Boots crunched against gravel, steady and unhurried. A beam of light swept across the dock, catching my shoulders, my tackle box, the glint of my reel. I squinted into it, raising a hand. You planning on staying out here all night? The voice carried that mixture of authority and casualness only certain men mastered, the kind that made everything sound halfway between a warning and a joke. The light dipped, and I saw him more clearly. Tall, broad-shouldered, uniform shirt catching a faint sheen of humidity. Sheriff's star glinting at his chest. His face was hard to read in the dim light, but his eyes narrowed just slightly as they settled on me. I swallowed, my pulse loud in my ears. Just fishing, I said, as if it wasn't obvious. My voice came out tighter than I intended. He stepped closer, the boards groaning under his weight. Little late for fishing, isn't it? His tone wasn't accusatory exactly, but it wasn't casual either. I shrugged, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Fish don't care what time it is, and I like the quiet. His mouth tugged into something between a smile and a smirk, though his eyes stayed sharp, watchful. Quiet's not always safe. He glanced toward the trees, then back at me, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. I shifted, gripping my rod handle like it was an anchor. I can handle myself. For a beat, the only sound was the cicadas. His presence was heavier than the night air, pressing against me in a way I couldn't explain. I thought he might scold me or worse, ask why I was really out here, why I always seemed to be on my own. Questions I didn't want to answer. Instead, he tipped his head slightly, studying me in silence. The flashlight beam trailed off, landing on the water, then on my cooler, before finally dropping to his side. Carry on, he said, though there was something in his voice. Not dismissal, not exactly permission either. A curiosity threaded through it, a hint that he wasn't planning to leave as quickly as I might have hoped. And just like that, the stillness of the lake wasn't calm anymore. It was charged. The sheriff didn't leave right away. Instead, he shifted his flashlight toward my tackle box, the beam glinting off the metal clasps. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried a steady authority. "Mind if I see your fishing license?" The request made my chest tighten, though I had nothing to hide. My hands fumbled at the worn wallet in my back pocket. The boards creaked under his weight as he stepped closer, the smell of leather and faint aftershave drifting toward me. I slid the card out and held it toward him, but he didn't take it right away. He leaned down, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine, and the warmth of his presence broke through the cool night air. He finally plucked the license from my hand, his fingers grazing my knuckles for half a second longer than necessary. My skin prickled. He scanned it with his flashlight, the beam bouncing across the laminated surface. "All up to date," he murmured before handing it back. His hand lingered just a fraction too long on mine as the card exchanged back, and though it could have been nothing, my heart insisted otherwise. I slipped the license back into my wallet quickly, trying to mask the way my pulse had jumped. Most men in uniform did their check and went on their way. This one didn't. He adjusted the brim of his hat, then moved to the edge of the dock, planting his boots like he had all the time in the world. "Catch anything yet?" he asked, gaze shifting from the water to me. I shook my head. "Not a bite." He gave a low hum, almost amused. "Figures. You cast like a city boy." I turned toward him, narrowing my eyes, though I couldn't hide the small laugh that slipped out. "And what does that mean exactly?" He smirked, one corner of his mouth tugging higher. "Means you probably bought that rod at a big box store without ever learning how to use it." His tone wasn't cruel, more like a nudge. Teasing, but sharp enough to sting. I rolled my eyes and set my rod down beside me. I didn't realize the sheriff's department required fishing expertise. "Doesn't," he said, leaning against one of the wooden posts. "But out here, it's a skill most folks pick up before they can drive." I should have bristled at the jab, but instead I found myself studying him in the dim glow of moonlight and his flashlight beam. The lines at the corners of his eyes suggested years of squinting under the sun. His posture was relaxed, but there was a restlessness in the way his thumb tapped against his belt buckle. "You planning on sticking around just to critique me?" I asked finally. His gaze flicked to me, steady and unreadable. "Maybe." The word was simple, but it landed like a stone in the quiet. My throat went dry. We stood in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the dock and the chirp of night insects. His flashlight beam drifted lazily across the water, but his attention never fully left me. I felt it, heavy, lingering, like the pull of a current beneath calm water. "You always come out here alone?" he asked suddenly. The question was casual on the surface, but the way his eyes pinned me said otherwise. "Yeah," I admitted, forcing my voice steady. "It's peaceful." He nodded slowly, though something in his jaw tightened, like he wanted to say more but didn't. I shifted, setting my elbows on my knees, pretending to check my line. "You always patrol this lake?" "Not really." He adjusted his hat again, avoiding my eyes for once. "Just sometimes." The words hung between us, heavier than they should have been. He didn't say why he chose tonight, or why he was still standing there when he'd had every chance to drive off. The night air cooled, but I felt heat creep across the back of my neck. My mind flicked through possibilities, explanations, excuses. None of them felt right. I risked a glance at him. He was staring out over the water, but his body was angled toward me. Not outward, not away, toward. My chest tightened with the realization, half dread, half something else I wasn't ready to name. He caught me watching him and raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again, words tangling before they could form. Instead, I shook my head and looked back at the water. The silence stretched, but it wasn't the easy kind I'd come here to find. It was thick, charged, like the air before a storm. Every shift of his boots on the boards, every scrape of his hand against his belt buckle, seemed amplified. He stayed, talking here and there, teasing me again about my bait, about how I'd probably scare off the fish with my impatience. His voice carried that mix of humor and something else, curiosity, maybe more. And though I tried to convince myself he was just doing his job, checking in on a lone fisherman, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath it, that his lingering wasn't about duty at all. That night, under the stars and the sheriff's steady gaze, the stillness of the lake felt anything but peaceful. The first time he showed up again, I told myself it was coincidence. A man on duty, checking his route, making sure nobody was drinking or leaving trash by the water. That's what sheriffs did, after all. But when it happened the next night, and the one after that, the word coincidence started to feel flimsy. Every time I drove down that dirt road, dust trailing in the glow of my taillights, I told myself I might have the lake to myself again. Every time, I parked, unloaded my gear, settled at the dock. And almost without fail, not long after, the low growl of his truck would echo through the trees. Headlights would slice across the water, twin beams reflecting in long, silver streaks. At first, I tensed each time, the way I always did when authority drew near. But slowly, something in me began to expect him. He didn't always talk much. Some nights, he just stood there at the edge of the dock, leaning on a post, letting his flashlight skim across the water like he was truly checking for trouble. But his eyes would flick back to me. Not once, not twice, but often. Long enough that I started to feel it in my chest, that silent watching. It became our unspoken rhythm. I'd cast my line, listen to the cicadas, and he'd linger nearby, boots solid against the boards. Sometimes he'd tease me about my empty cooler, about how maybe I wasn't cut out for fishing after all. Other times, he'd lapse into quiet, and the silence between us grew heavier than words. One night, he broke that silence by stepping closer. "You're still holding that rod wrong," he said, his voice low, almost amused. I snorted, shaking my head. "You've said that before, and you still haven't learned." Before I could argue, he moved in behind me. The sudden nearness made my skin prickle. His chest brushed my shoulder as he reached around, adjusting the angle of my elbow, his hand warm on my wrist. "Like this," he murmured, his breath stirring the hair by my ear. I froze, every muscle tight, but not from fear. From something else entirely. The air felt thick, my lungs slow to fill. His arm lingered against mine a moment too long before he stepped back, clearing his throat. "There," he said gruffly. "Better." The line arced over the water, smooth and clean. I barely noticed it. The next night, he did it again. Not teaching this time, but brushing close as though it was natural, inevitable. His hand grazing mine when he handed me the bait. His shoulder bumping mine when he leaned to check my reel. Little things easy to dismiss, if they hadn't kept happening. We started laughing more, too. He'd crack dry jokes about me scaring fish away with my city smell, and I'd fire back about him hiding in that truck because he was afraid of mosquitoes. The laughter loosened something between us, but every time the sound faded, the weight of his gaze settled in again. There were moments when I caught him looking, not at the water, not at my line, but at me. His eyes would linger, tracing in silence, until I met them. And when I did, he didn't look away right away. He held it, long enough that the air between us seemed to hum. I started to notice things I hadn't before. The way his jaw tensed when I smiled. The faint exhale through his nose when our shoulders brushed. The way his thumb tapped against his belt buckle when he was too still, like he was holding something back. None of it was spoken. None of it had to be. One evening, clouds rolled low and heavy, thunder rumbling in the distance. The lake was restless, ripples scattering the reflection of the headlights across its surface. I debated leaving, but before I could pack up, his truck pulled in. "You're stubborn," he said when he stepped onto the dock, rain starting to patter against his hat brim. "And you're persistent." I shot back, though the smile tugging at my mouth betrayed me. He shook his head, but his eyes lingered, catching mine in a way that made the storm feel secondary. When the rain grew heavier, he held the bait tin out toward me, and our fingers brushed again. Not by accident this time, I was certain of it. The touch lingered, deliberate, before he pulled back. That was the moment it clicked. His closeness wasn't random. His presence wasn't duty. Whatever this was, this silence, this watching, this edge we hovered on, it was chosen. The night stretched around us, filled with thunder and rain and 1,000 words neither of us spoke. I cast my line into the restless water, my hands steady even though my chest wasn't. And when I felt his gaze settle on me again, heavy and unrelenting, I didn't look away. The night the storm broke, the air was heavy enough to choke on. The sky carried that strange, electric stillness before a downpour, the cicadas quieting as if even they knew what was coming. I'd been sitting on the dock longer than usual, staring at a line that hadn't twitched in hours, when I heard the now familiar growl of tires over gravel. His truck rolled to a stop behind mine, headlights cutting through the haze. He stepped out slower than usual, hat pulled low, the beam of his flashlight sweeping the trees before it dropped toward me. "Storm's rolling in," he called, his voice carrying over the water. "You planning on getting yourself struck by lightning tonight?" I smirked faintly but reeled my line in anyway. The clouds were already bruising purple, wind stirring the surface of the lake into restless waves. "Fish don't mind a little rain." He shook his head, boots heavy on the dock as he joined me. "Fish maybe don't. You might." When the first thunder cracked, closer than I expected, he tilted his head toward the trucks. "Come on, before you drown out here." I should have resisted, made some joke about not taking orders. Instead, I found myself packing quickly, following the steady weight of his footsteps back toward the vehicles. The rain began in sheets, pelting the gravel, soaking us before we even reached shelter. He popped the passenger door open and motioned me under the wide awning of his truck, a shield against the worst of it. We stood there, close enough that his shoulder brushed mine every time he shifted. Rain hammered the metal roof above us, turning the world into a blur of water and shadow. For a while, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing beside me, steady but heavier than usual. His gaze was fixed outward, past the rain, as though he was staring at something only he could see. "You ever get tired of it?" he asked suddenly, his voice low. I blinked. "Of what?" "People." He shifted, leaning back against the truck. His hat dripped steady rivulets of water down his sleeve. "The way they look at you, the things they think they know." The question hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, the weight of small-town whispers pressing against my ribs again. "All the time." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Yeah." He paused, long enough that the rain nearly drowned the space between his words. "I was married once. Didn't last." I glanced at him, surprised. He rarely said anything personal. He rubbed a hand across his jaw, sighing. "She said I was too closed off, that I kept the best parts of me locked away." Maybe she was right. His words hung in the damp air, heavy, almost confessional. He didn't look at me as he said them, but I felt them land between us all the same. The badge, the uniform, the sharp edges. For a moment, they slipped, and I caught a glimpse of the man beneath. "You ever think about trying again?" I asked carefully. His jaw tightened. "Thought about it. Never really tried." He shifted, finally glancing my way. "Not sure there's anyone patient enough for it." The thunder rolled again, shaking the ground beneath our boots. The wind whipped rain sideways, spattering across us despite the awning. I shivered, wet fabric clinging to my skin. Without a word, he shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. The gesture was simple, practical. But when his hands lingered for a second too long, adjusting the collar, it didn't feel practical at all. The warmth of the fabric was nothing compared to the warmth of his touch. "Thanks," I murmured, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. His eyes lingered, holding mine longer than they should have. The rain kept pouring, the storm pressing in, but in that moment the world narrowed to the space between us, thin, fragile, about to snap. His hand hovered, as if caught between pulling away and doing something else entirely. His mouth parted, like words sat just on the edge of leaving. I felt my breath hitch, my pulse stumble, my whole body leaning forward without permission. The tension was sharp enough to cut. Then, just as suddenly, he stepped back. His hand dropped to his side, his gaze breaking away to the darkness beyond the rain. "You should probably head home once this lets up," he said, voice rougher than before, as though he was trying to smooth over whatever had nearly happened. The jacket sat heavy on my shoulders, his scent clinging to the fabric. Rain, leather, something distinctly him. I wanted to argue, to push past the line he'd drawn, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded, pretending to watch the rain. But inside, I wasn't watching anything at all. I was replaying the way his gaze had lingered, the way his hand had hovered, the way the air between us had almost broken open. For the first time, I realized just how thin the wall was between his duty and his desire, and just how close we both were to breaking it. By the time his headlights cut across the lake again, I already knew something was different. The sound of his truck didn't carry its usual steady rhythm. It roared louder, as though he'd pressed harder on the gas, and when the door slammed shut, the sharpness of it made the night echo. I stayed on the dock, Rod propped uselessly beside me, pretending to check my line. But I didn't need to look to know he was there. His footsteps carried more weight than usual, boots striking the boards like each step had too much energy pent up behind it. When he came into view, the beam of his flashlight swept across me quick, almost careless. His jaw was tight, shoulders squared as if he was bracing for something. He didn't even greet me the way he usually did, just moved straight to my cooler and flipped the lid. "Empty," he muttered as though the fact surprised him. I arched a brow. "You've checked it enough times to know that's nothing new." He didn't respond right away, just crouched, staring into the empty space like it held answers to a question neither of us wanted to ask. Then he shut it with a snap, stood, and brushed past me. His hand grazed my arm again, light, fleeting, but not by accident. I felt heat spread from the spot he'd touched. I'd grown used to his closeness, his lingering presence, but tonight it was different. He was different, restless, uneasy. "You're not really here for the fish, are you?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. The words hung in the cool night air, bold and undeniable. He froze. Silence stretched between us, longer than it ever had. He didn't laugh, didn't tease, didn't deny it. His shoulders rose with a breath that seemed heavier than the storm from nights ago. Then he turned. In 2 strides, he was in front of me. His hand pressed lightly against my chest, guiding me back until my spine met the solid side of his truck. The cold metal bled through my shirt, shocking and grounding all at once. For a heartbeat, we just stood there. His hand firm against me, his eyes locked on mine. The air was thick, charged, a storm of its own. I could hear my pulse louder than the night insects, feel the tremor in my chest under his palm. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost ragged. "You don't know how long I've been trying not to." And then he kissed me. It wasn't careful or tentative. It was rough, desperate. The kind of kiss that spoke of years spent locked up, words swallowed, feelings buried. His lips crashed into mine like he'd been holding back for a lifetime, and I couldn't do anything but give in. The taste of rain still clung to him, sharp and wild. His hand slid to my jaw, tilting my head, pulling me deeper into him. My fingers fisted in his shirt without thinking, tugging him closer until the space between us vanished. His other hand pressed against the truck beside my head, caging me in, his body heat radiating against me. Every part of him felt urgent. The way his breath hitched, the way his chest rose and fell, the way his lips moved against mine with a hunger that left me dizzy. When he finally pulled back for air, his forehead rested against mine, his breath hot against my lips. "Damn it," he whispered, the words more confession than curse. I didn't let him retreat. I tugged at his shirt, the fabric damp with night air, pulling until he gave in again. This time, the kiss wasn't just desperate. It was deliberate, deeper. His hand slid down, gripping at my waist, grounding me and igniting me all at once. The world blurred. The cool night, the hum of cicadas, the faint ripple of the lake. All of it faded under the weight of him pressed against me. The truck's cold metal at my back only sharpened the contrast of his warmth, his solidity, the raw need burning between us. His fingers found the hem of my shirt, tugging it loose, knuckles grazing skin. My breath caught, my hands answering in kind, pulling at his collar, slipping beneath fabric to feel the heat of him. Every touch was sharp, charged, electric. We stumbled against each other, laughter breaking through for a fleeting moment when my elbow knocked the side mirror, but it dissolved instantly back into gasps and urgent kisses. His hand slid up my back, strong and unyielding, pulling me in tighter still, until I could feel every ragged breath he took pressed against my chest. The night spun around us, but here, in the shadows beside his truck, it felt like the world had narrowed to just this. The crackle of need, the heat of skin, the sound of breath between parted lips. I don't remember who pulled harder, who tugged first, but shirts loosened, fabric shifted, and for the first time I felt the raw truth of him. Solid muscle beneath uniform, the tremor of restraint barely holding. His lips found my neck, hot, searching, and I let my head fall back against the truck, a low sound escaping me that I couldn't swallow. It was too much and not enough. God! He muttered against my skin, voice breaking with something more than desire. A plea, a confession. The tension between us, built over nights of silence, teasing and sidelong glances, finally broke wide open, and the force of it nearly knocked the breath from me. And just when the moment threatened to spill over into everything we'd both imagined but never dared to voice, the world blurred into heat, touch, and ragged breaths. And then it faded, as though the night itself pulled a curtain over the scene. The details slipped into shadow, unspoken, leaving only the certainty of what had finally been unleashed between us. The morning after, I couldn't think straight. The smell of pine and rain still clung to my skin, but stronger than that was the memory of his mouth on mine, the rough press of his hands, the way my body had surged toward him like it had been waiting for years. I didn't see him in town that week. I went to the grocery store, nodded at familiar faces, listened to gossip spin around me, but he was absent. No patrol car parked outside the diner. No glimpse of his broad shoulders in the gas station. It was as if he'd vanished. And yet, every night when I drove to the lake, the headlights came. We didn't speak of what had happened. Not directly, but the air between us had changed. It was thicker now, heavy with what we couldn't name. He kept his distance at first, stood with his hands on his belt, boots planted at the edge of the dock, gaze fixed on the water. But even then I felt it. The way his eyes slid toward me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his jaw tightened when my sleeve brushed his arm. The way silence filled with everything we weren't saying. One night, as I poured coffee from the thermos, he reached for it at the same time. Our fingers brushed, lingered. His breath caught just a fraction, but enough. He pulled back quickly, muttering, "Careful, it's hot," as though that explained the tremor in his voice. Later, while I reeled in a hopelessly empty line, he moved behind me, his chest brushing my back as he adjusted my grip. It was the same lesson he'd given me before, but different now. His hand stayed longer on my wrist, his palm flat against mine, steadying me. My pulse hammered at the contact. When I turned my head slightly, our faces were inches apart. His breath grazed my cheek, warm and uneven. For a moment I thought he'd do it again, kiss me like the night against the truck. Instead, he stepped back, boots scuffing against the boards, breaking the moment with a gruff, "Better." But it wasn't better. It was unbearable. A week later, he finally said the words. "If anyone finds out," he muttered, voice low, almost lost in the sound of crickets, "I'll lose everything." I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips. He was staring at the water, hands clenched tight around the railing of the dock, knuckles pale. His shoulders rose and fell with a long breath. My job, my standing, my life here, all of it. His confession stung, though not because I didn't understand. I did. This town chewed up anything it didn't understand and spit it back out. He knew that better than anyone, badge or not. But still, the words left me hollow, guilty. like I was the danger he was trying to guard against. "I know," I said softly. "I know what it would mean." He finally looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes were torn, conflicted, but underneath, there was hunger too. Desire. Pulled at me like a tide. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered. But he stayed. That became our rhythm, this dance of denial and indulgence. In public, we were strangers. I'd pass him on Main Street, and he'd tip his hat without meeting my eye. I'd sit in the diner while he stood in line for coffee, and his gaze never drifted my way. But at the lake, everything was different. At the lake, his hand would brush my shoulder when he handed me bait. His leg would press against mine when we sat side by side on the dock. His laugh, rare and low, would rumble out when I complained about the cursed fish that never bit. One evening, I leaned too far reaching for my line and nearly toppled into the water. His hand shot out, gripping my arm, pulling me back against him. For a moment I was pressed to his chest, his breath hot against my ear, his heartbeat hammering against my back. Neither of us moved. Neither of us dared. He finally let go, muttering, "Clumsy." But his voice cracked on the word. Another night, he poured me a cup of coffee from his own thermos instead of mine. I took it, our fingers brushing once more, the warmth of the cup nothing compared to the warmth of his skin. I lifted it to my lips, and he watched me drink, his gaze lingering in a way that made my pulse race. It was these stolen moments, brief, reckless, dangerous, that bound us tighter than anything spoken ever could. But with every touch, every shared glance, the cost pressed heavier. Guilt and exhilaration knotted inside me, impossible to untangle. I wanted him more than I'd ever wanted anything, but I knew the danger. I knew what this town would do if they ever found out. And yet, when his hand brushed mine, when his gaze lingered too long, when the night stretched quiet and his presence filled every inch of it, I couldn't bring myself to care. Because beneath the badge, beneath the weight of his fear, I'd seen the man who stayed. The man who risked everything just by standing here, shoulder to shoulder with me, letting the silence speak the words he couldn't. Our bond deepened in the shadows, forged not by safety but by risk. By the knowledge that we were walking a line neither of us was supposed to cross, and yet neither of us could step away from. The lake became more than a hiding place. It became ours. A secret stitched together in the dark, dangerous and fragile, but real. And even as the guilt gnawed at me, even as the sheriff's words echoed in my head, "If anyone finds out, I'll lose everything," I couldn't stop returning. Because every night I came back, he was there. And every time his hand brushed mine, every time his gaze lingered, every time silence swallowed us whole, I knew. We had already crossed too far to turn back. The night felt different from the start. The air was cooler, calmer. The lake stretched out like polished glass under the stars. No storm clouds, no restless wind, just stillness. The kind that made sound travel farther, made every breath and heartbeat echo louder. I'd already cast my line when I heard the familiar growl of his truck on the gravel. Instead of tensing, instead of pretending surprise, I just waited. When the headlights swept over me, I didn't look away. He parked closer than usual this time. The engine shut off, and for a long moment he didn't move. I could just make out his silhouette through the windshield, sitting still, hands gripping the wheel. Finally, the door opened, and he stepped out, his boots crunching against the dirt like each step was a decision. He didn't go to the edge of the dock, didn't check my cooler or shine his flashlight across the water. Instead, he came straight toward me, his shoulders tight, jaw set. I tried to keep my voice casual. "You're late." He stopped a foot away, close enough that the scent of leather and pine clung to him. His eyes met mine, and whatever mask he usually wore, that guarded uniform calm, was gone. "I can't stop thinking about you." The words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, heat rushing to my face, though the night air was cool. He had spoken plenty of confessions in silence, but never like this. Never out loud. He dragged a hand across his jaw, restless, almost frustrated. "Every night, I tell myself not to come out here, that it's stupid, dangerous, That I've got too much to lose. He shook his head, exhaling sharp. But I get in that truck anyway, and I end up here. With you. My grip on the fishing rod faltered. I set it down beside me, steadying myself against the dock rail. You don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice cracked, rough with urgency. Because if I don't say it, it's gonna eat me alive. The lake was silent, still as though it was listening too. The stars above glittered, scattered and endless. His face was shadowed, but I could see the fear in his eyes, sharp as the badge he wore. I'm terrified of this town, he admitted, words tumbling out now, too heavy to hold back. You know what they'd do if they ever found out. About me. About us. His hands clenched at his sides. But I'm more terrified of losing this, of losing you. My throat ached. For weeks, we'd danced around it, circling the truth without daring to name it. Now here it was, laid bare between us, fragile and undeniable. I stepped closer, close enough that the heat of him brushed against me. I don't want to lose it either, I whispered. His shoulders sagged, like the weight of the words drained him. He searched my face, eyes fierce and vulnerable all at once. Then, slowly, he lifted a hand, rough and calloused, and cupped my jaw. This kiss wasn't like the first. It wasn't rough or desperate, wasn't born from years of repression breaking all at once. It was soft, careful, tender. His lips brushed mine with a reverence that made my chest ache, like he was memorizing the shape of me in case the world ripped it away tomorrow. I leaned into it, my hand sliding over his chest, feeling the steady thud of his heart beneath my palm. His other arm wrapped around my back, drawing me closer, holding me as though he could shield me from everything beyond the lake. We stood there for what felt like forever, the water lapping softly against the dock, the stars overhead spinning their quiet constellations. For once, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was full. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath mingling with mine in the cool night air. I don't know what happens next, he murmured. I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight them all. But I know this, I don't want to let go. I swallowed hard, the truth sharp and steady in my chest. Then don't. The night stretched around us, vast and uncertain. But in that small space, on that dock, with his arms around me and his fear spilling into something softer, the future didn't matter. I had come to the lake for solitude, to escape whispers and judgment, to disappear into quiet. Instead, I'd found something else, someone else, a man who saw me completely, a man I saw the same way. Maybe the world would never understand us. Maybe the town would never forgive us. But here, at the water's edge, with the stars above and his heart steady against mine, I understood something clearer than I ever had before. I hadn't just found peace at the lake. I had found him,